Today we roll up our sleeves to detect and defend against the SSH Snake tool. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. Back in January of 2024 this year, the Linux and Unix world was rocked by a script that worms its way through insecure SSH connections to map your environment. And Tanium has some super smart people that help our customers in the trenches every day. And a team of two TAMs built content that you need to find this thing in your environment and to close the loop. So with me today on the show are Bart and Tyler. Guys, please introduce yourself.
My name is Bart van Knijf. I'm based from the Netherlands, living close to Amsterdam. I've been a technical account manager in Tanium for more than 6 years. And some interesting fact about my history, which made me a bit proud, is that I have been educated by Andrew Tannenbaum himself on the Free University of Amsterdam. And Andrew Tannenbaum did develop Minix, or Minix, whatever you want to call it, and that was picked up by Linus Torvalds to create Linux.
Hi, my name is Tyler Schultz. I'm based out of San Antonio, Texas. I've been with Tanium for 3 years. I'm a director of endpoint security research. Prior to joining the research team, I was actually a technical account manager with Tanium, and in a prior employment, I worked for the United States Air Force doing hunting and incident response.
I'm impressed already. Yeah, this is great. This is wonderful to hear your credentials for both of you. So I know, Tyler, you were on the show recently for our Guardian episode. So folks, if you haven't seen the Guardian episode, we're going to reference that a little bit later. Don't stop what you're watching right now. You can always go back to that in the playlist. So what we're going to talk about today, though, does involve Guardian and some special content that we've built. So Bart, for starters, can you tell us what is SSH Snake? What's the backstory here, and why should people be concerned?
Yeah, why should people be concerned? Let's first talk about SSH. If most, if not all, financial messaging services or big applications, they are running on Linux, and most system administration and change management on these boxes is done through SSH. And what you'll find in many organizations, configuration policies for SSH exist, but they are not regularly reviewed, reported, or audited. So that's the relevance of why you would do it. And if you look at SSH access, normally we say SSH username host, you get a username password challenge. But if you have tools around like Ansible or Puppet, they make use of key authentication. And also administrators do that because once you have a private and public key pair, you put that public key pair on the remote host in a authorized key file, then it's just, you just type in SSH username host, bang, you're on the system. No password needed. To protect that a little bit, you can create a private key which requires a passphrase. So whenever you access that private key and somebody would steal your access to your keyboard, you still need to type the hidden secret passphrase. But reality, what I've seen is that many administrators don't use the passphrase. That's really the relevance. So, and if you look to this program, built by a guy out of Poland. Well, he originated from Australia, but he works in Poland for the Opera web browser team. He created a very smart Bash script. It's one of the most awesome scripts I've ever seen in my life. Only 1,200 lines and everything in Bash. And he was able to find private keys, to see which remote hosts were accessed from a single system, and thereby, traverse through the entire landscape in my lab environment. And just in a couple of minutes, that single script, 1,200 lines, base 64 encoded, no files whatsoever, it was just, crawling around my entire lab environment within 15 minutes, and it had found every access possible in that environment without using a password, only the private key, which was residing on my Mac operating system.
So to recap for some people who are still trying to wrap their head around this, because all right, confession, I started on DOS and Windows back in the day, so I was kind of new to SSH, but then I had to learn it. So what you do from a beginner standpoint is, okay, I need to access a Linux box. I don't want to type in my password every time, so I put in a key. And I set up the keys using SSH keygen and go through all that and then swap the keys on the machine. So then it's secure. But the whole point is I don't want to type a password again. So I don't protect the key on my local machine, which is the no-no. Because if I'm trying to get out of using a password, and then what was the password I set on that key last year when I created this? And so there's a little bit of really responsible hygiene required to keep your keys maintained so you know what's in them and your passwords. So I can understand, because I'm a lazy admin like everybody else in my lab, at least. If it's in production, we're not going to do that. But that it does happen in production where people have key files without passwords, because after all, I'm trying to avoid typing a password by using the key, but I have to type a password to use the key. So anyway.
But you also have in production lots of test situations where they want to automatically deploy software or do changes, do other maintenance tasks. And one of the major things which flagged something, we found a key, an authorized key of a person who did not work anymore with the company you are with. So people change roles and still have their public part of their key pair, on the authorized key list. So, if such a person would pass by and say, hello, let's drink a cup of coffee, they would plug in their equipment on a network or still have some Wi-Fi access, man, they can access whatever they could access during their working time for the organization. So lifecycle management of keys is just like identity management for passwords, users. It's basically the same. But who does it?
Right. The same problem on Windows and Linux, different ways of managing credentials, but credential hygiene is really what we're talking about here. On Windows, there's a tool called Bloodhound. In Tanium, we have Impact to kind of map these things. So from what I understand, this is a tool. Tell us what this tool does on the Linux side, similar to what we see on the Windows side.
I would say on Linux, it's easier. You just scroll the file system to find any private keys. And once you have the private keys, there are known host files on systems. You also have them on Windows. Then you can see, okay, what are the remote systems being accessed? Okay, let's see what we can do. Then we also have the shell history. If you're using Bash or C shell or Z shell, you have a history file. That tool also looks into your history files. Okay, did you do any SSH command with a -i option and then pick up a private key? And based on that information, it has a very rich environment to dig into to find any potential access path to any remote system you have, whether it's in your closed network, in your /C network space or /D, or even on a remote system. There it finds all the access paths possible and go from there. And once it's on that other system, it does the same trick again. So it's really a iterative loop. It caches all the information internally, so it remembers where it has been before and works from there, only in 1,200 lines.
1,200 lines is a beautiful script. I've never written a 1,200 line bash script, but that's I'm sure that's some beauty right there because of that recursion, right? Recursion, when you're learning programming, recursion is a beautiful thing to watch. It's also powerful and scary. So you wrote a article together, both of you. You wrote an article for the Tanium Resource Center at help.tanium.com. Why don't we start by just pointing folks to that article, tell them how they can find it, and show us kind of what we've got documented there.
Here is basically the article which tells you about what kind of dashboard you have available once the Guardian Spotlight content is in there. Let's go into the dashboards being generated and talk from there.
So the way you access the dashboard is you go into data and then dashboards. You can filter on emerging issues and then search for SSH. And then you'll see the Guardian Spotlight, SSH hygiene, and network traversal risks. We'll go ahead and open that up. And then we're presented with the dashboard. Bart, if you want to go ahead and walk us through kind of the wave tops of what we've got on the dashboard here.
Yeah, it basically makes use out of 4 or 5 sensors. Top thing, it's showing SSH servers on non-Windows systems and on Windows systems. So in this environment, we have 300 SSH servers on non-Windows, typically the Linux systems. And here we have only one system running as an SSH server on a Windows box. And that can be the SSH, OpenSSH server software from Microsoft, but it can also be Cygwin or any other popular OpenSSH tool out there. And from one customer, they were amazed to find that they had 1,000 SSH servers on Windows. The security team did not know about. And that was implemented because there was a team somewhere in a remote department who did not want to go through the hassle to comply to all the policies and regulations around Active Directory. And they thought, okay, we need to move forward with this project. Let's arrange the access through SSH. And thereby they could access their Windows servers, passing by all the policies and requirements in Active Directory. Then the other dashboard we have that is showing SSH key, I think I think that's the orange one, Tyler, with the passphrase usage. So here you see that we have in this environment we have 4 keys which do not have a passphrase. So if someone would be able to kick off that SSH Snake script, that script will pick up those keys and use them to traverse through your network. Based from there, you go to the SSH private key cipher strength. But when you look at SSH or OpenSSH release cycle, then over the years, SSH is pretty old, but over the years, a lot of cipher algorithms have been improved and strengthened. So here we started up with DSS. Well, everybody in who knows DSS know that this is a cipher which you should not use. But if you still have a very old and ancient Unix system lying around, then maybe these are still using the DSS algorithm for the keys access. And then RSA is typically approved, though there are many people who think, well, we shouldn't use RSA, we should use stuff like elliptic curve RSA or Edwards style algorithms, and these are typically approved. But yeah, we were pretty conservative. We say RSA is approved and DSS is not. But if you have strong policies for access, you may consider to make use of the more advanced encryption algorithms. Also, we are going into the era where you will see quantum computing, and there is this threat. Okay, we store encrypted values now and decrypt them later. So from the whole quantum computing protection or threat protection perspective, it's also an argument that you should start, at least inventory what algorithms you're using for access, and you can maybe later on then kick off a project to start improving those cipher usage. Tyler, if you scroll down, then there is this text list where we have configured all the risk items you may look at. So that's the SSH configuration hygiene topics, which is on the bottom left. So we have the private key without the passphrase. They can be compromised. We have, if you ask that question, SSH audit private keys or SSH authorized key, you might be able to see keys which were from previous employees or people with changed job roles or outdated test accounts. And you might, see keys which you say, hey, these should not be allowed. These should be removed. This is bad hygiene.
People in the U.S. would say you're throwing trash on my lawn. It's like, hey
Yeah,
man, you're pulling back the covers. I didn't want anybody to see all this mess. But what I really like about this, so with Guardian, this is a dashboard that would be automatically available to our cloud customers, and also available to on-prem with some updates. So what I really like is these plain text fields in here that show you, it's educating you. When you open the dashboard, it tells you, hey, this is what you need to look at. This is the sensor that you need to run and how to filter the results to see what's coming up in these charts. And I'm looking at these charts here and just thinking, okay, if this were my production environment, I would have some real concerns. And so I'm really grateful to see that we've brought some light to an area that often doesn't get enough attention.
Another thing here which just picks, which really points at me at this point is this SSH server fingerprint duplicates. So whenever you log on to an SSH server system, then it tells you, hey, this is this server, this has this fingerprint, and the server has a public-private key pair as well. And this fingerprint is generated from the public key. And it's whenever you log on for the first time, then it tells you, I have this fingerprint for this server. Is this really the server you want to connect to? Because it could have been spoofed. When you say yes, then it gets stored in the known hosts file or in the registry on a Windows box. And there you go. And the next time that server changes, or you want to do a man-in-the-middle attack, then whenever you connect to that server and then say, hey, this IP address and fingerprint combination is wrong, then okay, maybe I have here a spoofing problem. This happens. This whole duplicate thing that happens a lot when people start cloning systems and do not reinitialize the public-private key pair of the server. And that's also a very obvious hygiene thing. If you have these fingerprints and you're allowing duplicates, why the heck do you have fingerprints at all and key management at all? It's just, doesn't make sense to me at least. But you will be amazed how many duplicates you will find. That's all part of hygiene.
Yes, and that's where we specialize in hygiene for security here at Tanium.
Yep.
So this is great visibility. Now, you were telling me earlier as we were prepping for the show, there's a way to map this out. So with the sensors, and so the dashboard is pulling from some custom sensors that were designed by you two for this scenario. So then I know if people go out, and we've got links in the show notes for all this stuff. So we've got the community article link there from the Resource Center, links to the SSH Snake GitHub, where all that's out there that you can go see. This is all public. It's all open source, right?
Yep.
But the problem is that if you run that in your environment, it could look malicious. You don't necessarily want to run it. So what if I understand it correctly, you have given people the ability to get the same style of output and generate the visualization without actually running that tool. Is that right?
Yeah, getting started with visualization. There you go. So yeah, copy that question. You see it, the question gets the computer name, the authorized keys, and the private key details. It does it in the same way as the SSH Snake content would do it. So we have here a lot of Windows systems which do not have that stuff, but let's sort on things like a passphrase or a private key. Then you see we have some stuff available there. When you run this question in your environment and you hit the export button, so top right, then it's just basically exporting this data. And from there, if you go back to the article, then this CSV file you need to run through a Python script. So if you scroll down to the bottom, then you can access this Python script, but you need to have credentials within Tanium portal to get the Python script itself.
To recap, what we've done is we used the article, we ran the question in the article, we exported that as a CSV, and then that data, then there's a Python script there linked in the article that you do need login access to access that over on the Tanium Resource Center. So you download the Python script, run it against the CSV file to massage that into a format that you can then plug into one of these open source graphing tools to actually get the graphing of your environment. This is why I said we're going to roll up our sleeves today. This is not just all out of the box. It's going to take a little bit of fun stuff, but this is what we live for in IT, right? And in security, we live for opportunities like this to play with tools and scripts and make some really cool stuff out of it. So let's take a look.
Yeah, this is once you've logged on, you can access the script. We have the usual disclaimer, it's not GA material, but I'll show you what it does. So let's assume you have this script and you put it in a Python program. If you're used to Python, it's basically running Python on your Mac or on your Windows system, but you need to install this particular network X library using pip. But if you run into that, there is in the article references how to do that. And then I've renamed the export into my own lab CSV file, and then you run the script, and basically what you get is then a .gexf file, which you can then use in a tool called Cytoscape or Gephi to create some nice graphs. Cytoscape session here, but this is this session, and basically what you say, okay, let's import a file, and if you import a file, that's basically the file just generated. You choose something like a default option to render the whole stuff. I take the default option, pick up another window where it is generated, and here you see how this whole stuff is being visualized in my environment. So here you see that in this case, my name, this is basically the key I generated, the private key I generated on this particular host name, which happens to be MacBook. And from there, I'm able to go to an administrator login on this Windows 10 system, or become Tanium on this RHEL 7 lab system, or become root on this Solaris system. And here I can also become root on this Solaris 7 system, but from root I can go to my own RHEL 7 system, but I can also go to a RHEL 9 system and to a RHEL 8 system. And basically this allows you mapping out what is possible in terms of SSH access when someone would run that SSH Snake tool.
You're getting this similar output from the Tanium sensor that then you export, run through the Python, so that you don't have to actually run the SSH Snake across your environment.
Yes, exactly. One of my customers they had about 40,000 Linux systems, and you can imagine that such a graph would be very dense if you have 40,000, but they were in separate domains, and these domains should be segregated. And by using this tool, they could see that there was still some access possible from one domain to another.
Questions to ask here. This requires that the Tanium client be installed on all those Linux endpoints, because I guess if you would run SSH Snake, the tool, it would find anything in the environment, where this is only going to report on endpoints that have the Tanium client installed, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's something good to keep in mind. Tanium is not going to crawl your network or worm through your network. It's only looking at the data on each Tanium Linux or Unix client there. So this is great stuff, really. And I know this is a little bit thick for people who are not used to working with SSH every day. The bottom line is there's some roaches under there when you pull back the covers, things you got to look for that you were hoping not to find is probably there, as often as the case with a security audit, right?
If you want to do remote access, you can, in the article, there is a link to the original SSH Snake Git location. So you can download it, you can run it, and then that Git article from Joshua Rogers also has a Python script which takes the output of SSH Snake, and then you can also run it into these tools like Cytoscape or Gephi. And that's basically where I got inspired by to do this stuff also within Tanium. And yeah, you can play around with it in your lab. And I'm sure many people are playing with it, because I published something on LinkedIn and I got a lot of hits and a lot of reactions on that.
So is this content complete, or do you have additional plans to expand it?
I am busy also making a package where you can delete authorized keys from within Tanium. And that is, I think, particularly useful if once you have identified, or at least you have some visualization and some information on what's out there, then you probably will find keys from which you say, these should be removed. But removing keys is removing access, and that requires change management. So this is not something to be done lightly. But it's one of the iterations where we could help in mitigating risks. And another package I'm thinking of is these authorized keys are all stored in home directories of users. And one of my customers does not allow that. They put these authorized key in a central location administered by the administration account root. So only the root account can add or remove those authorized keys. And thereby you're getting more control. So that's another package where we pick up the authorized keys, which is residing in many locations, and put them in a central place so they can be better administered. And you can do better life cycle management.
So it sounds like the visibility is phase one. The control of cleanup is coming later with some custom packages that you're working on. Well, you have to keep us posted on when that comes out. And I'm sure you'll update the community resource there as well when that's available. So moving back over to Tyler, a question for you then. How do I get this? Those dashboards you were showing were really nice. Where do I find those, and how do I know for sure that I've got them?
All of our Tanium Cloud customers, you already have the content. It's actually available in your console today. You may have seen the Guardian notification that actually linked you to the article. It doesn't directly link you to the dashboard, which is a little different from some of the vulnerability-related Guardian content that we've produced, mainly because this one is also a little bit different. And so we showed you go to the data tab, look at your dashboards, filter for SSH in the emerging issues label, and then you'll be able to see that dashboard. For on-prem, what you'll do is you'll go to the solutions page and import the emerging issues content set. Now you should see an update available there soon. Once you're on the latest version of that, the content will be available within reporting, same mechanism as we showed you in the video.
Well, guys, we're running out of time. Anything else as we wrap up today?
Yeah, so one item of note, as you saw, this is definitely a little bit different from the traditional Tanium Guardian content that we've released. Normally, Tanium Guardian content is related to a specific CVE, specific vulnerability. In this case, we're starting to expand what it is that we're highlighting, because vulnerabilities are just one aspect of risk to an environment. When you look at a vulnerability, vulnerabilities could be from an unpatched piece of software, which is most common, which is what you've seen a lot of the Guardian content on before. But in this case, this is a vulnerability related to a misconfiguration or a potential misconfiguration. And so we're starting to expand and offer additional content in between those celebrity vulnerabilities that happen periodically to give our customers the ability to proactively mitigate and manage and address risk for things that are not a traditional CVSS score of 10 type vulnerability, that are maybe a little more prevalent in their environment, just from, as Bart mentioned, 40,000 endpoints at his customer, and they had issues in terms of lateral movement potential across domains. So being able to highlight different aspects of risk is something that we're looking forward to doing with future Guardian spotlights. And if anyone has any questions, comments, feedback, by all means, feel free to reach out to the endpoint security team.
There's a bunch of links for you in the show notes here. So there's a link to that community article. And then when you look at that community article at the very end, there's a list of resources there, which will take you to all those other public open source repos for the SSH Snake code. So that wraps up our show. But hey, you know what? Right before we close up here, I do want to make a quick plug for Converge. Everybody loves to go to Converge, and you'll get a chance to meet these guys on the show today. They'll probably be there as well, so you get to talk to them in person and maybe go to some labs A lot of fun hands-on stuff. Take your certification exams. And one easy way to get a free ticket to Converge is being a speaker. If you go out to converge.tanium.com, we are asking for customer speakers. So if you'd like to come tell us a story of something that you did with Tanium, how it rocked your world and made life better, we'd love to hear your story. And if you think, well, it's not that big of a deal, yeah, go ahead and let us decide if it's a big deal or not, because a lot of times people are too modest with what they've accomplished with Tanium. So we'd love to share and help others, just like content today. Maybe you've created something like this that you'd like to share with others. We'd love to hear about it and love to give you an opportunity to get a free pass to Converge and tell others. So go to converge.tanium.com for our call for speakers, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. This year we're in Florida. It's going to be nice. Florida in November in the U.S. I can't pass that up. So that wraps up today's episode of Tanium Tech Talks. And until next time, go Tanium.